Hello and welcome back to the basic series, and today we are going to discuss conclusions. We have already discussed syllogisms as our first topic and also practiced a few questions on the same. Make sure you watch that as well before you start this class. Now let's talk about decoding conclusions. Now conclusions is a very important topic when it comes to critical reasoning for the CLAT exam and for other law entrance exams as well. Let's understand what exactly are conclusions. But for that, we need to first understand that where do conclusions come from? From a logical statement, right? From a logical argument. The first thing is to understand what exactly is a logical argument and what are its components. So, as commonsensical understanding goes, a logical argument is an argument which has a logic, correct? Now, but in terms of critical reasoning or reasoning in general, a logical argument contains two things. One is a premise, and the second is a conclusion. To give you a very simple example, let's take a sentence which is I study every day for the CLAT exam. I study every day for CLAT. Therefore, I have a better chance to crack it. Okay. So this is my sentence that I study every day for the CLAT exam. Therefore, I have a better chance to crack it. Now, here let's understand what exactly is a premise and what exactly is a conclusion. Now, when you talk about premise, this can, of course, be a whole video in itself, but in very short and very simple terms, a premise is a statement. A premise is a fact. A premise is a detail. A premise could be a statistic. A premise could be any information which you have. Okay. So in this, what is the information which you have? The information is I study every day for the CLAT exam. This is a fact which is given to us. Now, on the basis of this fact, we are giving another statement which is something which we are trying to establish based on that fact. That means a premise is leading us towards a conclusion, towards something which we are trying to prove. And what is that? That I have a better chance of cracking the CLAT exam. Can you say the conclusion without having the premise? No, you need to have a premise in order to have a conclusion. Because अगर आप कोई चीज conclude करते हो तो उसका एक premise, उसका एक any information to give that conclusion should be present, correct? So, in very simple terms, a premise and a conclusion together form a logical argument. Once again, simplifying it for you guys, a logical argument has two parts, a premise and a conclusion. अभी हम डिटेल में समझेंगे conclusion क्या होता है. But for now, understand that premise is a statement, premise is a fact, premise is given information, premise is data, premise is statistics. It could be anything, right? कोई भी अगर आपको information दी है तो वो premise है. एक से ज़्यादा premise भी हो सकती है. There can be more than one premise. Let's say I make another sentence. I like apples. I also like mangoes. Okay. Therefore, I love the summer season. So that is my sentence. Let me write it for you again. Let's make it like this. Love apples. This is first statement. I love mangoes. This is the second statement. Therefore, I always wait for the summer. Now, here you can see that we have two pieces of information. One is that I love apples. The second is I love mangoes. Now, both of these are premises. Both of these are piece of information. This is premise one, this is premise two. And both of these premises are leading us to a conclusion that because I love apples and mangoes, therefore I always wait for the summer season. Now, you could say that there is an implied logic here. What is an implied logic? That apples and mangoes are probably more available in the summer season or they are of better quality in the summer season, but that is not mentioned anywhere. That is an assumption, which is also the third component of a logical argument. So although I said that a logical argument has two components, which is premise and conclusion, it also has a hidden component called as assumption, which we'll talk about later in different classes when we study the concept of assumptions. But for now, a logical argument made up of premise plus assumption plus conclusion. Now that we understand what exactly is a logical argument, we are in a better position to understand what exactly is a conclusion. So let's move to that. So conclusion is nothing but what the author is trying to prove, what the author is trying to say, or what anyone, not just the author in context of a reading comprehension, but anyone who is making a logical argument, what is he trying to prove? So when I make the conclusion that I study every day for the CLAT exam, the purpose behind that is to prove that I have a better chance to crack it. When I say that I love apples or I love mangoes, the reason behind that, the main point is I love the summer season. So a conclusion is the author's main point which he's trying to establish, which he's trying to say, or which he's trying to convince you of. It could be anything. He might be trying to convincing you of his giving in conclusion, or he might not be convincing you of his given conclusion, but it is the author's main reference point. It is what the author is trying to establish. Okay. Now, another very important doubt which students have is the conclusion mentioned in the passage? Is it given outrightly? Is it present in the passage or not? So the answer to that is maybe, maybe not. It might be in the passage, it might not be in the passage. In some cases, it is mentioned explicitly that what is the author trying to prove. In some cases, you would have to use your own critical thinking skills to understand that, okay, these are the premises, this is the logic, this is the argument structure. So the author is probably trying to prove this. So to give you an example, let's say if the author is talking about the rising level of pollution in, let's say, Delhi. So the author might be telling you how the particulate matter 2.5 is increasing, how government is not taking adequate measures to reduce air pollution, how vehicular pollution is a big contributor to pollution in Delhi, how odd even policy is not that effective. So all of these are premises, but all of these premises are leading up to one conclusion, which is the author's point that air pollution is not being addressed properly in Delhi. It was not explicitly given, but you could understand it from the statements, correct? So maybe or may not be present in the passage or in the statement. Now there are some indicator words which help you understand that इसके बाद conclusion आने वाला है. Conclusion is going to follow these particular words. जैसे कि in the examples which I gave you, the word was therefore. I don't know if you carefully noted it or not. I like apples, therefore I wait for the summer season. I study every day for the CLAT exam, therefore I have a better chance of cracking it. Now here, therefore के बाद हमेशा conclusion आया. Because therefore is a word which suggests that okay, now I'm trying to put my main point which I'm trying to establish that ये इसकी वजह से मैं ये कहना चाहता हूँ, ये चीजें मैंने establish कर दी, इसीलिए ये होना चाहिए. So therefore could be one word, thus could be one word, hence could be one word. There are many such words. Given that could be one word, because could be one word, consequently could be one word, since could be one word. So all of these words are indicator words which help you identify premises and conclusions in a particular given passage or a given paragraph. Now they can be a suggestion or explanation or a refutation as well. Okay. Now the next thing is, how do you find a conclusion in a particular given passage or in a given logical argument? There has to be a process to it, right? So let's understand the process. Firstly, now we know that the conclusion is a belief or opinion which can be derived from statements, which are premises, belief or opinion of the author, of the person who is making that statement. Now, another important question to address here is there only a single conclusion from a logical argument? The answer is maybe, maybe not. There can be just one conclusion. There can be more than one conclusions as well. It depends on the nuance of the argument. It depends on how many premises are there. It depends on how many arguments the author is trying to make. Based on that particular argument, there can be one or more than one conclusion as well. Now, another important thing to keep in mind while identifying conclusion is do not make any assumption. Assumptions are different. Assumptions are something which are implied as a logic. Assumptions are something which are hidden information. We'll talk about that in a different class. But assumptions are different from conclusions in the manner that premise को conclusion तक लेके जाता है एक assumption, right? Assumption is something which is hidden between the premise and the conclusion. जो implied logic होता है वो हमारा assumption होता है. Whereas conclusion is something which is quite apparent. Conclusion is something which we establish as the main crux of the argument. and you need to use only the given data to answer. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि आप conclusion किसी random basis पे अपने assumption के basis पे बना दो. When I say that I study every day for the CLAT exam, I can make the conclusion that I will have a better chance of cracking the CLAT exam. But can I make a conclusion that I will have a better chance of cracking, let's say, the NEET exam, the medical wala NEET exam, right? I cannot make that conclusion because I am making an assumption. What assumption am I making? That studying for the CLAT exam would also help me studying for the NEET exam. But मेरे पास ऐसी कोई data नहीं है which can suggest that. Therefore, I cannot make the conclusion that studying for CLAT would also help me, perform well in the NEET exam. So that would be an invalid conclusion, and we don't need to make any assumptions. We need to only use the given data to answer our questions, right? So this is the simple process. A process ke baad, what are some important things which you need to keep in mind as steps to finding a conclusion? The first step is obviously to identify ki premise kya hai and conclusion kya hai in a logical argument. Premise would be your information, your facts, and uske basis pe what have we concluded, what have we proved, what are we trying to establish or convince you of is your conclusion. So जब आपने identify कर लिया premise and conclusion, half the job is done. Now when you look at the options, you need to check whether the options lie within the scope of the question or not. क्या question में क्या बात हो रही है और आपके options क्या बात कर रहे हैं. Those should match, right? You would be eliminating generic and vague conclusions. Generic conclusion हो गया. Let's take the same example. I study every day for the CLAT exam. Therefore, I will be very successful in life. Now, that is a very generic and vague conclusion. I cannot conclude that I will succeed in everything in life just because I study every day for the CLAT exam. There are multiple aspects to life. So that is very broad or very generic as a conclusion. That is not specific. So you would have to focus on specific conclusions rather than generic or vague conclusions. And you would also filter out the extreme options. What do we mean by extreme options? Extreme options are the ones which have words like always, words like never, words like, what else? None. So these are your extreme options which give you a very extreme conclusion. An example could be I study every day for the CLAT exam, therefore, I will always crack the exam no matter what the difficulty level is. You cannot say that for sure, right? That's too extreme of a conclusion that I will always crack the exam no matter the difficulty level. You might crack the exam no matter, but always बोलना थोड़ा सा extreme हो जाता है. Then you could say that he does not study every day for the CLAT exam, therefore, he would never be able to crack the CLAT exam. This is again an extreme conclusion. You don't know what his prior knowledge is, what his prior experience is. So, you cannot usually go with the extreme options. In 99% of the cases, they are wrong options. So, these are few steps to keep in mind while identifying conclusions. Firstly, identifying the premise and conclusion, checking the scope of the question, eliminating the generic and vague ones, focusing on specific ones, and filtering out the extreme ones. This is a simple process, right? Let's test out our theory on a couple of questions before we wrap up this class. The statement is in an ODI match played between India and Pakistan, the total runs made by the Indian team were 400. Okay. 320 runs out of 400 were made by pacers. Pacers means fast bowlers. Now, we have two conclusions. We have to check if they are valid or not based on the given premise or the given statement. 80% of the team consists of pacers. Can we conclude that 80% of the team consists of pacers just because 80% of the runs were made by pacers? इस इंफॉर्मेशन के बेसिस पे क्या हम बोल सकते हैं कि 80% टीम में पेसर्स ही थे? नो, नॉट रियली. वी कांट से दैट. हो सकता है पेसर्स सिर्फ 10% हो लेकिन उन्होंने रन्स 80% बना दिए हो. दैट इज वेरी मच अ पॉसिबिलिटी. सो दिस कैनॉट बी अ वैलिड कंक्लूजन. The opening batsmen were pacers. Do we have any information which suggests that opening batsmen pacers थे या pacers जो थे वो opening batsmen थे? No information to suggest that, so we won't be making any assumption. This would also be a wrong conclusion. So both the conclusions are wrong, which means neither one or two is true, and option D becomes the correct answer. This is a very simple example of a question on conclusions. Now, let's do one more question before we end this discussion. The statement is only good artists are invited to the exhibition. No one without good art knowledge is a good artist. So that is our statement. Conclusion is all invited artists in the competition, no art win. Is that a valid conclusion? So we have good artists. So only good artists are invited to the exhibition. Okay. No one without good art is a good artist. So if you are having good art, you would have would be a good artist, or if you are a good artist, you would be having good art. Both of them are complementary. So all invited artists in the competition know art well. Can we conclude that? Yes, we can conclude that, because only people who know art well are good artists, and only good artists are invited in the exhibition. So this is a valid conclusion. The second conclusion is those artists who do not have good art knowledge are not invited to the exhibition. Yes, हमारे स्टेटमेंट में लिखा है कि only good artists are invited. So artists do not have good art knowledge or are not good artists are not invited. So this is also a valid conclusion. Both the conclusions are correct, which means option number C would be the right answer, that both 1 and 2 are true conclusions. Now these are very simple and very straightforward questions. Exam में questions इतने simple नहीं आते. We'll be practicing more questions on conclusions, which would give you more clarity on the concept and theory. Next class में हम theory का जल्दी से revision करेंगे, and we will be practicing more questions on conclusions. Till then, you guys also practice your questions on conclusions, and do let me know if you face any difficulties in the comment section of this video. Do drop a like if you found this helpful and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe the video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Have a good day.